Hare Krishna and welcome to this video on the Bhagavad-gita chapter 1 verse 2. In this video, in several parts, we will review the main points that are commented on by various Acharyas, various teachers in different philosophical schools to get a more complete picture of what is going on in this verse. And here is the list of the Acharyas we're going to cover, and we are noting here that the arrangement is a chronological one. So here that we have the 10 Acharyas, and that they are going chronologically. They are in a temporal order, with the oldest one first and the most recent one last. And in this manner, we may get some idea about the flow of ideas and how the exchange of ideas has been occurring. And this video is actually in two parts. So in the first part, we will cover Shankara down to Keshava Kashmiri. And in the second part, we'll start with Madhusudana and then going down to Prabhupada. All right, so let's start by first reciting the verse. Sanjaya uvacha drishtva tu pandavanikam vyudam Duryodhanastadam Acharyam upasangam yup Raja vachanam abravit. Sanjaya said, now having seen the Pandava army arranged in a military formation, having approached the teacher, at that time Duryodhana the king spoke a speech. So here's the summary of main points by the Acharyas, and we start with Shankara. And unfortunately, he does not have a particular comment for this verse, so we will move on to Abhinavagupta, who also does not have a comment on this particular verse. However, he did make some interesting remarks in the previous verse, verse 1, about various ideas proposed by other scholars based upon those words that occurred in that verse. And for example, so he presents an analogy between the physical battlefield at Kurukshetra and the human body as a battlefield with its sense organs. So that may be something interesting to look at if you're interested. Then to the next Acharya, which is Rāmānuja, and he has commented on this verse specifically, but that comment is not only about this verse. It covers the verse, but it also covers other verses, namely those up to verse 11 in chapter 1. So he's offering a verse group comment that is in regard to all these 12 separate verses that are continuous. And the main point he's making, which is most relevant to verse 2, is that a point that hinges on the question, which army is most powerful? And Ramanuja says that Duryodhana here in these verses tells his teacher Drona about the current state of affairs as he observes it. And Duryodhana's assessment, according to Rāmānuja, is that the Pandava army, led by Bhima, is fully capable of beating his own troops. So, if we again look at verse 2 here, we see that Duryodhana hasn't yet started speaking to Drona. He's about to address his teacher in the military arts, but he hasn't actually started. But that is coming up in verse 3 and onwards, as we may understand from the phrase Vachanam Abravit. He spoke speech. Vachanam Abravit. So Duryodhana is going to start speaking, addressing Drona. So now let's move on to Madhva. What does he have to say about verse 2? And unfortunately, he does not comment on verse 2 specifically, or on any verse in chapter 1. His Gita commentary doesn't actually start until verse 11 in chapter 2. So we have to wait. So we move on to the next Acharya in the line there, namely Śrīdhara. And the Vireshwarananda edition gives, at least me, the impression that Śrīdhara basically only engages in a slight rearranging of the original text to explain the syntax, and that there is some occasional glossing going on with some simple synonyms and such. But is that really the whole story? I don't think so. So the most important thing going on, in my opinion, is that Śrīdhara uses the word vyavastitam. And this word, according to Vireshwarananda, how he uses it, has the meaning situated. So the army is situated, physically located, standing in a particular location and formation, which is that what Duryodhana has seen, according to the Vireshwarananda's version. But I think that's more to it than just that. For according to some dictionaries, the word vyavastitam might have a more abstract meaning as well, carrying the notion of a state. Not a state as like a land or like that, but a state in terms of more abstract notion. So on my reading then, Śrīdhara informs us not only that Duryodhana sees the Pandava army standing physically there, but also that Duryodhana sees the whole situation in terms of options of what to do and solutions to the problem and causes and effects, etc. So on this view, he's seeing the state of affairs, vyavastitam. And such a stress on an evaluation or assessment of the whole situation, the current state of affairs, as opposed to simply seeing the vision of two physical armies standing on the physical battlefield. such a stress on the more abstract notion of evaluation of assessment would then harmonize well with what Rāmānuja has said in his commentary. So that may be one way of looking at it. Now let's go on to Keshava Kashmiri, a contemporary of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And what does he say? Well, one point that Keshava Kashmiri mentions is that Vaishampayana reiterates the answer of Sanjaya, quote unquote. And this point reminds us that it is here Vaishampayana who is narrating what Dhritarashtra and Sanjaya are saying in verse 1 and 2. So in terms of who is speaking, there is an outer level of nesting, an outer layer of narration, in which Vaishampayana is saying that Sanjaya is saying. And for those of you who have access to a copy of Van Buitenen's Bhagavad-gita in the Mahabharata edition, you can see that Vaishampayana starts this particular round of narrating at 663.14.1 at the very top of page 39. A second point that Keshava Kashmiri brings up is that Sanjaya gets Dhritarashtra. Sanjaya understands that Dhritarashtra is very attached to his son Duryodhana and his well-being, and is less interested in other things, for example, in the more philosophical question of what is the right thing for him to do. A third point we can bring up is that Keshava Kashmiri says that this second verse of the Gita subtly suggests that Duryodhana's state of mind is disturbed here after having seen the impressive forces of the Pandavas. So if you look at the verse here, we see that this troubled mental state of Duryodhana's is not explicitly mentioned in the original text. Nevertheless, such a reading is suggested by Keshava Kashmiri. So Duryodhana is worried here. And this is the end of part 1 of this video, and in part 2 we will start by looking at Madhusudana Saraswati's commentary. Thank you very much for watching, and Hare Krishna.